folks. Hopefully you're ready and you're with us. And it's live at 5:05, live-ish at 5-ish. Welcome everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I apologize for getting distracted. Life is so distracting, and especially the distraction of the moment is I will admit is our big annual fundraiser, which is just launching and will be happening Sunday noon till Monday. So just been very busy with that, and I'm appreciative to all the wonderful folks who are already participating, have participated, are involved and engaged. To all of you, thank you. I was also on the phone with a fellow who was sharing with me some of the challenges he's having with some of his kids. Kids, boy, oh boy, kids are a challenge. I don't know if you have any, but they can be a challenge. No kids that I know. All the kids that I know are perfect. But I'm just saying that I've heard about them and I do get phone calls. So kids are perfect. They're all perfect and they're all a challenge. That's what we could say. Kind of like in-laws. Okay, they're perfect and they're challenged. My father-in-law, may live and be well, just had a birthday. Happy birthday, Saba, and many more. So if you're out there watching, happy birthday. And I actually texted him because I was late a day. I said, happy birthday. He said to me, don't worry, you're not late. I'm celebrating the whole month. I said, that's fantastic. Who said it has to be a day? Birth month. Happy birth month. I think this is much better. There's a lot more celebration to be had there. And if you're celebrating a birthday, I will refer you back to last week where we had a whole show about birthdays last week at Live at 5. And we spoke about Pharaoh, and it wasn't, Pharaoh's birthday, the only birthday party mentioned in the Torah. So if you're celebrating only a day, maybe that's the company you're keeping. You don't want to be in that company, perhaps Pharaoh. But celebrating a whole month, maybe everybody does that. I had in mind that we would talk a little bit more. I want to wish a mazel tov. I always have at least one mazel tov, it feels like, right? So we have one mazel tov I want to wish to a dear friend who popped in today to visit me, Niso Aharonian and his wife Serach. They got married during the pandemic and they had a child during the pandemic, and that's amazing stuff. We're happy for them. And it's a tough one, and I hadn't gotten to participate in either of those two events, but got to give them a hug and wish them mazel tov, and we hope for many more. I'm enthused. I just found out that that looks like I'm going to be able to qualify for a vaccine soon, because it turns out that 50-year-olds in Colorado will be able to get vaccines coming up in 2 weeks, I think, right before Passover. So I'm excited about that. I want to get something for the fact of being 50. It should be some bonus, some rewards I'd be able to reap. So it turns out I'm next in line for a vaccine. That's the good news for being 50. And I was born in 1970, so it always makes it easy for me to calculate my age. I'm on a decade. So zeros and fives are good years for me, and I enjoy being 50. I don't look back. I remember turning 40, and I was excited, and it was good. I think I became more of a grown up. At least I tried to. Fine. It's about time. By the age 40, Americans should be grown ups. 50 certainly, and now also good. It's also good. I had a pandemic 50th birthday where people drove up in front of the house and we all had masks on and there were balloons and things tied to the car. And, that was it. That's epic. That's historic, right? Turned 50 during the pandemic. What are we all going to look back on and say, what I did? I remember during the pandemic, and what will yours be? What will you remember? What are you going to say? Yep, I remember that I did this during the pandemic. Plenty of kids started college, graduated from things. Plenty of people, major life events, moved, changed jobs, and people moved. Can you imagine picking up and moving to a new city where everybody is at home? How do you meet new people? How do you connect to the community when in a pandemic? I know people that moved to Denver during the pandemic, and I spoke to them on the phone. I remember when I there was one such person that moved to the community and joined our synagogue during the pandemic, and he showed up with a mask on. So we met each other with masks on. And then the first time I saw him without his mask, it was outside later. And I was like, whoa, that's what you look like. I was thinking you looked like somebody else. I mean, it's when you don't have a face there, you meet somebody and who knows what's going on behind the scenes. I was last night, I was sitting with a notary. Don't worry, nothing bad, all good. And I had to show my driver's license, and she didn't even want to see my face. I thought, how do you know this is really me? You can't see this is me. I'm wearing a mask. What's the old joke? The old joke is in, if you would have walked into a bank with a mask on, in 2019, they would have called the police. If you walked in without a mask in 2020, they call the police. They walk into a bank. This is it's just a different world. How can you tell, who's who? The man, well, the man behind the mask, or the lady behind the mask. It's just been weird. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about was today is something that we haven't gotten to in the last few weeks, and this is the end. Today's Thursday. We're going to close the book on the book of Exodus, and we're really not going to get to this topic again necessarily unless we brought it up. And it's very apropos of this, how we are seen with our masks, because the Torah spends a lot of time talking about the Big Day Kahuna, otherwise known as the special garments worn by the priests in the temple. Okay, that's part of we've had this conversation before, and about the temple and stuff. And maybe you're thinking, Rabbi, I've worked all day. I sat in front of the screen, and now you want to talk about like the temple garments, and you think that's exciting to me. Like, who cares? So really, I need a break from from the screen, and that's what you're giving me. But no, don't worry. This is, well, I guarantee we'll come up with something that it'll be meaningful and be worth tuning in for. I feel like that's my job. It's 5:00. It's not the late show. You're not kicking back after an evening, after a couple of drinks in your pajamas. You just finished the work day probably, or still in the middle of it, and or whenever you're watching this. And I feel like it's my job to to cap the day with something meaningful, worthwhile, and a change of pace. So let me do my best. But let's try to talk for a minute about how important it was to the Torah that the temple priests should appear in a most royal and dignified way. They wore very, very. There's a lot of description about what the Kohanim have to wear. The Kohanim, again, are those who serve as the temple employees, the temple staff, the staff of the temple. You could call them a priest, but whatever that word is, we call them Kohanim. And they had a lot of stuff that they were doing. There were other people working in the temple. There was all the Levites, the Levium. The Levites also had jobs. They were there, and they would sing every time that there was any kind of a daily service going on. There was singing, and there was musical instruments. There was a whole orchestra there, and that was the Levites. They didn't have special clothing. They were also watching the doors. The Levites worked the gates. They were the bouncers of the temple. When the Boulder College students got there and got rowdy, so you had a bunch of big Levites that were able to control the situation and to let them in or not. So the Levites had jobs. They worked there also, but they didn't get special clothing. But the priests did. The Kohanim had special clothing, and you should know that this is not just an extra credit here. If they're not wearing these clothing, these garments, the special garments, they're not allowed to do their thing. It's invalid. It's not. This is an irreducible, critical component of whatever kind of service the Jewish people are doing nationally in the temple. It has to be. The priests have to be wearing that. And there are two levels. There's the basic level, and then there's the high priest. And they work different things. The basic, your basic priest, basic Kohen in his temple service had to wear 4 specific garments, and the high priest 8. And those are mandatory, and they're described in detail. Now, the only other thing to add to that is just in terms of categorizing the temple garments is that the high priest on Yom Kippur dressed even differently than that. Okay, Yom Kippur was his big day, and he wore not one but two different outfits on Yom Kippur, and he variously changed back and forth. So with all this stuff, it seems to make sense that there's a lot to be learned from it. So I want to talk about a couple things. Number one, at the very basic level, the most basic level, when we wear a uniform, we are automatically elevated into the highest achievement of our jobs and our roles. I will talk about my own upbringing. And I went to a private school as a kid where in middle school, we had to wear a tie every day. I'm a shuggin about ties. So it's just my upbringing. I was in a school where from what grade is middle school? 5th grade, 6th grade? 7th grade, I guess, 7th, 8th, maybe it was 7th grade. But we wore a tie every day. That was the way that we were expected to dress. A collared shirt, for sure. We wore ties. I later attended a college where the dress code at college football games was a tie and a blazer. Okay, I don't know if that's always the case today, but it was then. At the University of Virginia, when there was a football game, a home football game that we attended, we wore a tie and a blazer. That's what you wore to the game. Uniforms are a significant thing. If you go to, I read once, I think this is a fantastic statistic. I read once that people who wore a tie to take the SAT did an average of 100 points higher. They scored higher by 100 points if they wore a tie. Now, maybe you'll say, well, those are the kind of guys that wear, people that wear ties, But I think that there's more being said here, which is dressing for the job is it elevates you into that role. You are doing that role. You have the uniform on. This is not specific to the temple, but it's the basic, it's the first level. You're wearing a uniform, you are positioned to accomplish this role, your task. You're on point, and you wear a uniform. And there's something to be said for that. We dress, you may be thinking, and it's appropriate to think, if traditionally speaking, observant Jewish men are wearing a very, specified kind of a uniform, in Hasidic communities, they have long coats. The outfits are usually, dark colors, typically black. There's a white shirt involved. There's a very, regimented uniform. And the basic concept of having a uniform like that, in part, not only is to identify with others, but it's a formal, dignified uniform, which is meant to impart a certain attitude in the wearer. The person in that uniform is meant to feel a certain way, and it's meant to be to make us feel a little more dignified, a little more presentable, and that as if we are all the time, doing a job for which we dress very formally. The time when people, it's interesting. In the West, like we are out here, cowboy attire. Imagine cowboy attire, which includes a 5 or 10 gallon hat, a big old hat. Okay, now there are certain times when it's appropriate to wear that hat, and certain times probably not. When the national anthem is said, you got to take that thing off, and probably when you go inside. Outside, you can wear it. We also have a hat and an idea of when to wear a hat. And interestingly, in traditional circles, you wear a hat when you're in a formal circumstance like prayer, like in synagogue. We don't take our hats off when we go into synagogues. We put hats on because a hat is a formal way of presenting oneself. And in a formal and an important situation, like when you're going to when you have an important occasion, you want to be fully dressed. You wear your hat. I once was told, and I I haven't researched this, but I believe it to be the case. The first American president who was inaugurated into office without a hat on was JFK. Okay, dashing young man, hair in the wind. But every president, American president before that, at his inauguration, which was an outdoor event, of course he had a hat on because he's fully dressed. It's a very formal event. You don't show up to that without your hat on. Yeah, it's a formal event. You wear your hat. So wearing hats has this element to it. It's like a formal thing. You wear the, think about. I don't know if this will resonate, but maybe in your past, it was like you can picture the cantor at the high holidays with a big old hat on there, big colorful hat that, has like looks somewhere between like a chef and the Pope, it's like a big old hat there. And you can picture that. That was a cantorial hat, very formal. And he would wear that for the most formal occasion. You're dressing up for the occasion. So one question we could ask ourselves is, well, what's the occasion we dress up for? And, when is that exactly? What do we get dressed up for? What do we get dressed up for? So clearly the thing that you dress up for is the event, the moment. That would be an indication of what's important. When am I on the spot? What am I dressing up for? It's so let's say, for example, we're coming up soon to the Passover Seder. What are you going to wear? A Passover Seder is a formal event. And you'll get people who wear, traditionally we wear a special garment, which is a white coat. It's kind of like a holy lab coat. If you think about that, it's like a long, white, thin coat, and it's called a kittel. And there's a tradition that Jewish men wear a kittel to the Seder table, or certainly, dress formally and, maybe even hat. The idea of dressing up for a Seder, people dress up for that. It's a formal occasion. Prayer, synagogues, holidays, temples. These are occasions. These are moments when we dress up, and the Kohanim no less than any. So the first explanation for what we're looking at here, that the Torah describing in rich detail the specific garments that the Kohanim have to wear, the priests have to wear in the temple. It first and foremost is they're at work, and their work is formal, dignified, holy. They're on the spot, and therefore they have their uniform, and it's the most special uniform that they have, and that's why the Kohen Gadol will have a more special uniform. His role is perhaps more elevated, and on Yom Kippur, he himself has a special uniform. Now, within that uniform itself, there are some fascinating, interesting things which I just thought to mention. Okay. One of them is, and this is perhaps one of the most unique garments. There are a couple that are very unique. One of the most unique garments that the high priest would wear was like a gold plate, a gold plate that would go over his forehead. It was held in place by some straps over the top, maybe around the sides, tied in the back, and it was a gold plate that he wore over his forehead, and it's called a tzitz. What was it? What would it look like? What was written on it? The tzitz had two words on it. And in English, they would be holy to God. And he wore that on his forehead. That was when he was walking around at work, he had a sign over his head that said, holy to God. And that there's actually a story in the Talmud about a fellow who, one of the sages who was actually in Rome, and the Talmud records that he got a glimpse of this thing. Now, why do I say he was in Rome? After the temple was destroyed, it is recorded that the Romans who destroyed the second temple carted off many of the great pieces, vessels, parts of the temple. They carted it off back to Rome. Where is that today? It's very likely in the Vatican stash over there. And this was a story about that. This sage was in Rome, and he was called in and recorded in the Talmud, and he was asked to take a look at he was working on something that he was there, and he got a glimpse of the tzitz, which is there. If you want to know where it's recorded that the Romans carted off and took the temple vessels back with them, you could go to Rome and you could look at the Arch of Titus. The emperor, general who sacked Jerusalem, recorded in bas relief his Roman soldiers carrying off the menorah. And it's right there in the arch, right there in Rome. I've seen it with my own eyes. You can go look it up. So they took these things and they have them. Anyway, the tzitz is about marking off talk about wearing your personal identity on your shirt sleeve. So here, written right on his head, holy to God. And it was written in gold. Now, this garment and several others, I'm going to describe just one or two more. They have, not only are they dignified, are they holy garments, so they specify the role of the person wearing them. But interestingly, the Talmud also says that they had a certain benefit to the Jewish people. A holy benefit that the Jewish people experienced when we had a high priest who was wearing this thing. What that means is if we are fortunate, and it is not currently the case, when we were fortunate to have a temple and a priest, a high priest wearing this thing, that there was a certain merit that we had, and it was a vehicle for divine forgiveness for some of our mistakes and shortcomings. It's a very interesting idea that, based on the fact that the Jewish people were represented to God by this person, the high priest, wearing this beautiful gold headdress, if you will, the Jewish people were automatically forgiven for some of our shortcomings. What an amazing, powerful tool to have in our possession, and what a tragedy to have lost it. Now, I'll give you one other example. Also a special garment to the high priest. He wore a long kind of a robe, and the bottom hem of the robe was interesting. It had little bells interspersed with pomegranates. Bell, pomegranate, bell, pomegranate. And these little things were on the bottom hem of the robe that the Kohen Gadol was wearing. And the verses actually describe that of course, when someone's wearing clothing with little bells on them, when he would approach, you could hear him coming. And in part, that's considered to be a very appropriate, respectful way for him to walk into the temple, that his presence, his imminent arrival should be announced. He shouldn't pop in. If someone is very honored and dignified, we don't pop in on them unexpected and unannounced. So God's presence, we announce ourselves before, we come in. We don't come in unannounced. And the Kohen Gadol, the only one to go into the Holy of Holies ever throughout the entire year, and only on Yom Kippur, he shouldn't walk in unannounced. He doesn't burst in. It's not dignified. It's not appropriate, not respectful. He goes in with the bells making the sound of his approach, marking the sound of his approach. But in addition, our sages say that when we were fortunate enough, when we merited to have a Kohen Gadol wearing this garment, that those bells and the voice of the ringing of the bells was a merit, that the Jewish people were forgiven for the shortcoming, the mistakes of Lashon Hara, of the hurtful and harmful speech that, as we know, Clean Speech Colorado is designed to try to address, to help us to stop. Lashon Hara is an ancient challenge, and the Jewish people always struggled with this, to speak in a way that's devoid of hurtful, harmful words about one another. But when we fell short, and we had a Kohen Gadol who had this special robe with these bells, the voice of the bells countered in heaven the negative reaction from heaven to the voice of Lashon Hara. And without the temple, without that high priest, we don't have that merit. And we're suffering the consequences of our own Lashon Hara. There are so many more. There are more and more and more pieces. The other garment that's so unique is the breastplate. There was a special unique garment that had 12 stones, precious gemstones on it, each one with the name of one of the 12 tribes on it. And the high priest is wearing this thing, and in fact, it was a tool also. It wasn't just a garment. It was a tool for divine communication. And then Tanakh is replete with stories about how the Kohen Gadol could actually interact with God. God would text message him through the breastplate with the letters of the names of the 12 tribes on these 12 gemstones would light up, and certain messages would appear directly from heaven. These are unbelievably powerful and valuable garments, and the office of the priest and the high priest particularly was so valuable to us. My single hope, and we'll stop here for today. My single hope is that hearing a little bit about it, reading a little bit about it, perhaps this week at Shabbos when we read these parshas, is to get a little bit of a glimmer of that emotional yearning for, these things were valuable. They added so much to the richness of Judaism, to the spiritual lives of the people, and without them, we're bereft. We're missing so much. It's hard to feel something about these, to feel a concern, a yearning. We wish that we had that. We're bereft of them, and we miss it. That would be the goal. Would be to have a little bit of an emotional attachment, an emotional connection. That's a little bit of my hope. There's lots more to say, lots more to read. Just a last announcement before we close for today. For those of you who like to join us with a little bit of a pre-Shabbos festivity on Friday afternoons tomorrow, you could join us at 5:15. The truth is that we are, we're heading into Snowmageddon, and you need a little Warmkeit, which is Yiddish for a little warmth, and you need a little warmth to go into a snowstorm with. So 5:15 tomorrow, please consider joining, and we'll zing you into hopefully a warm Shabbos, even though it'll be cold outside. It's always a pleasure. Sorry for being a little bit late, everyone. Going to wish you a wonderful rest of the evening. Have a healthy, have a holy, and we'll see you, God willing, tomorrow or next week on Live at 5.